Hello, and welcome to Civics, a program on Arlington Independent Media. I'm Michael Shea, the host of this episode of Civics, where we meet community activists and volunteers who are engaged in their community in their schools, their churches, and their county organizations. We hope that you're not just informed about your community by this program, but that you're also inspired. And today we're happy to be joined by Lynn Pollock, who's been involved with her school, with her community, and with many organizations. Lynn, thanks for coming on the program.
You're welcome.
Now, Lynn, you have had this long history of involvement, but what were you like as a student yourself?
I was a very hardworking student, but didn't do very well in classes. I don't take tests well, but I did get very involved with a sorority and volunteering there. I helped when I was away on semester at sea. I helped with running a church program every Sunday. We had Easter, so I helped with Easter. I was the Easter bunny, so that we could have fun. But little things, but things that just made it more interesting and fun for me.
Semester at sea. I didn't know that about you. Was it safe? How did it go?
It went very well until the ship ran aground.
Oh, well, that would normally be a problem, I think most people would say.
Well, it was sort of a problem. The shipping line was very generous. They shipped us to Israel, and we got to finish our entire semester there in a 4-star hotel, and they provided room, board, spending money. And
happy ending.
It was pretty darn great.
So what kind of things did you like to study in school?
I studied biology.
Okay.
So on the ship, I studied marine biology.
All right. Now, when did you move to Arlington? How long ago?
About 20 years ago.
All right. And you've been involved with, what was your first areas that you started to volunteer with?
The first time that I got involved was while I was working, and that was helping with food drives and clothing drives through my work. When I stopped working, I became much more involved with my church, very involved with Scouts, and then I was very involved with the children's schools.
Right.
Yeah.
And what sort of things did you work with the schools? What were some of the...
I started out by helping out in a kindergarten. They wanted to have each child put together a book, but they didn't have enough help for someone to do all the tedious. And I'm a very organized, tedious person, so I was happy to work with each child, make sure each book was complete, and then bind them so each of them could take them home at the end of the year.
Right. I should be clear, I don't think you're a tedious person. I think you're able to do tedious tasks.
Fair enough.
But I don't find you very
Fair
tedious
enough.
at all. So. And what did that lead to in terms of the Civic Association? Or how did you get involved with the Civic Association?
The Civic Association I began getting involved with when one of the neighbors I knew wanted to finally create our conservation plan, because our Civic Association never had one. And that meant creating the survey, getting it out, collecting it, tallying the results, and then writing the plan from those results so that we could show what our neighbors wanted. It took 4 years to do, with actually 2-year hiatus when none of us could work on it, but we got it done and we got it submitted, the board voted for it, and now we are able to get funding for projects to do exactly what our neighbors want us to do.
Right. Just to give people some background, in Arlington County, the various civic associations, in a sense, have responsibility for coming up with what, as you put, a neighborhood conservation plan.
Yes.
And it's the various infrastructure, transportation, I don't want to say amenities, but the projects that basically define how you can move around a neighborhood and the character of the neighborhood. And it's not, so it comes from that sort of bottom up from the neighbors.
Yes.
And your neighborhood had not had one before. Had there been, did you get involved to create one, or had there been people, how did I guess, I'm just curious, how did the neighborhood finally decide we should do this?
Well, the one neighbor that started it was involved with the Civic Association, where I was not at that point. And he really wanted to be able to see improvements. We were stonewalled in too many cases where we needed to have improvements, and we couldn't because we couldn't go through the NC process. And so he wanted to start it and asked if I could help. And actually the two of us are now our Civic Association's NC reps, and we take turns going each month. But it was that wanting to be able to help neighbors who were saying, this isn't working, and we need to make it safer. And in fact, our first two priorities are making traffic more reasonable and safety of our pedestrians.
Which Motivated probably a lot by the fact you had children in school at the time.
Actually, that and just walking around the neighborhood, busy streets are always challenging, and we have way too many busy streets that are very wide to cross.
Right.
And that makes it challenging even for adults.
Right, right. So what were some of the specific things that had to be done to make that happen? Can you maybe take us through some of the steps?
Yes,
Yeah.
we had to come up with a survey because
Right.
you have to have a survey, however many will be willing to send it back. So it has to go to every household. We don't have very high dues. It's only $10 to be a member of our Civic Association, and only a few people ever pay. So we didn't have the money to do a massive mailing. So we got executive board members and other members of the Civic Association to literally walk every single one to our 2,000, I think it's 1,000 or 2,000 households. It's
a lot.
Whichever it is, it's huge.
It's a lot.
And to walk it to each household and make sure each person got the envelope. And then they sent them back in. And then we had to tally them. I still have them all in my house. And we had to put them onto a program and tally who said this, who said that. What they could say was what's good about your neighborhood, what is bad about your neighborhood, what do you want to see as improved, what is the most dangerous thing in your neighborhood, what are you most proud of, what are your goals for how our civic association can improve. The other major thing this did was let our civic association know that they're in that civic association. Most of them
Right.
didn't realize it.
Right.
And so that helped them to become more cohesive as a civic association.
Did you find that people would express a lot of different issues, but there was a lot of common themes?
Within certain areas. We're very geographically spread out.
Right.
So you would find a lot of people would be worried about this road up here,
Right.
or not having a park because they're near no park that they can
Right.
walk to. And it all depended on which part of our civic association they were in.
But immediate neighbors were having very common
Yes.
areas.
Most definitely.
Common themes.
Mhm.
So you got then a lot of information.
Yes.
So synthesize it. What's the next step?
There's a basic blueprint of how they go. You can take any of another's plan and look at it and say, okay, we have to make sure we cover all of these, as long as there's concern within our neighborhood. And then you just go through and say, okay, traffic. What did our surveys indicate about traffic? And how can we help them? What do we need to make sure? Because if it's not in your plan, you can't get money for it. So it has to be included. So we're very big on, as I said, traffic and safety, and also environmental issues, water retention, runoff. All of those were listed as very major things that a lot of people wanted us to keep an eye on. So all of that was written into the plan. That took a lot of work to make sure we really were showing what was from the surveys.
Right, because it's not in the survey, it can't be in the plan. If it's not
Exactly.
in the plan, it can't be in the
You
project.
can't get any money for it.
Right.
That's right. So once we got that done, we looked at it and said, now, is there any chance that we've not covered something we're definitely going to want before we do our next plan?
Right.
We feel that there's not, and we haven't had that happen yet, so that's good.
It took you how many years to get from start to finish of this plan?
A full was 6, because we had a hiatus where things happened and we just let it sit.
And how long does the plan look out, or how forward-looking is the plan?
It is very forward-looking. It's just encompassing of the entire neighborhood. I don't think that it would be desperate to write another one, except that we have such a high turnover rate in
Right, right,
Arlington.
right.
You don't want to go more than 10 years.
10 years.
Is the typical what they would recommend.
So you're not in the off-season very long.
No.
If it's 6 years to do a 10-year plan,
But it's
a lot.
easier after that, because
Right.
you already have one, you're updating it.
Right.
The first time is a much more arduous
Right.
process.
Okay, so how detailed was the plan? I guess I'm curious. Was it
more-
actually this type of improvement at this spot? This is here, or was it more you're laying out principles?
It's both.
It's both.
It's
Okay.
both. You want to give general principles, and if
Right.
there are very important intersections, streets, or park areas that are mentioned enough to make it worthwhile to include it, you want to include it, so that there's no question that this is an important factor within your plan.
Right. So, what have you seen a project completed yet?
No,
when?
we have not.
When was it approved?
It was approved in 2010,
Okay,
so it's relatively new.
relatively new.
And it takes a couple years. It took us a year to get our first project idea.
Yeah.
And then you have to, again, do petitions and make sure you get enough signatures on the petitions. And then you have to have an initial planning, and you often have to have a second meeting about the same project that needs to be done. And then it has to go back into the county to make sure it's properly done. And that can take a long, and this particular one is taking a long time because there's a bioretention factor in it,
Right.
which may happen, or it's all approved, but now because it's close to where the new elementary school is going in and there
Right.
are traffic issues, that's now up in the air.
Right. But we also should be clear, there is dedicated funding for these projects.
Yes.
In principle. So it's not just trying to, you don't have to follow up by then finding the funding for it. You have to get approval for it.
Correct.
And then
Although if you can get alternative funding, that gives you more points within the NC process, and you're more likely to get your next plan approved.
were we able to do that?
We didn't have to. We have a brand new plan. We get extra points for doing that.
Oh. And so are you still involved with the Civic Association?
Oh, yes, I'm one of the executive board members now,
Okay.
and I'm the NC rep, yes, and I'm on committees.
So what is the next, other than I guess continuing to implement the plan, which is a big deal, I know, I don't mean to minimize that, but has another type of issue arisen that you've had to?
Well,
deal
we're
with?
dealing with the new school on the elementary,
Right.
on the middle school property, and I've also been asked by the NC to possibly be one of the representatives to one of the school's committees. I haven't given them a yes yet, because I'm not sure I really have enough time to give it what it needs.
Right.
But that's probably where the next thing will come in, is something through the NC process.
The various things you've done, would it be fair to say that you really learned doing them? Or
Oh,
there
yeah.
were there skills, though? Were there any skills that you brought to it?
My
from your own
organization is the only skill I really bring. Other than that, I have to learn. I don't
But that's
go
a big
into
skill.
it.
That's an important skill.
It's a helpful one.
Yes, it's certainly not something everyone has to the same degree.
True,
perhaps.
true.
Right. So what do you feel like has been your biggest satisfaction or your biggest success?
Our NC plan.
NC plan.
Oh, yeah. That was it took a lot of hours, it took a lot of work, it was a lot of teamwork,
Right.
which always feels good when you can work with others.
Right.
And it's done, and it's in there.
And in your time being engaged this way, have you had a frustrating shortfall, or is there many? What has been maybe a disappointment?
Disappointment is not getting other people as involved, and
Right.
not sharing some of the duties with others so that they're more involved. And then if I can't do that job anymore, maybe one of these other people might be interested. That would be more helpful.
Right. Do you have ideas? I mean, Arlington's the kind of place that a lot of people do get involved, but things take a lot of people. So do you have any ideas about maybe what Arlington could do?
Maybe not the most positive way, but doing something like putting an elementary school on a middle school property will certainly get some very heavy activism.
Right. I mean, it's certainly, when the contentious things come up, that is a way to get people out to meetings and
Maybe
engage.
grabbing them while they're doing that, getting them a little bit more interested. If you see that they
Right.
have an ability in an area, maybe, okay, this is starting to slow down and calm down, you're comfortable, maybe you'd like to help over here.
Right.
Always keep an eye out for that.
Has there been anyone who has either inspired you or maybe most impressed you?
My parents.
Okay, and what were they like?
Well, my dad still volunteers a lot and helps people.
Right.
He's actually my computer tech person. He's 88, but he's my computer tech person. And he's just always helping people, always giving to others.
Right.
He helped to run a small club that actually my grandfather started. He and my mother he was always the treasurer and she was always the president. Their titles switched, but that's what they always did.
Okay.
They were very active politically in their community in Florida. Just that's the kind of people they always were. I remember them always being involved in clubs and helping others.
And you were involved as a young child in the
To
same...
some degree,
Some degree? Okay.
not as much as what you see people doing with their kids now. It wasn't the same back then. It was, while you're in school, I'm doing this.
Right.
So it wasn't the same level of involvement for the children.
But you could certainly learn by example.
Yes.
And be inspired.
Yes.
By example. So what do you think of as what's sort of next? Or not so much next. Let me ask this: are there issues or community groups that you haven't been involved with, but that you're interested in? Would you say what are?
I'm sure that there are some,
Right.
but I, to be honest, haven't had time to look for any. I'll be honest.
They're probably looking for you. Right?
They may be, but I have not had time to try to find any others.
Okay, but you're still fully engaged.
I'm putting in 30 to 60 hours on volunteer time a week. So yeah, I'm fully engaged.
I think most of us are going to feel like slackers after hearing that. We may be proud of our own volunteer activity, but that's certainly very
It's not
impressive.
always like that. It's just current. It slows down. It really does.
Let's just go back to the schools for a second. Your kids are still in school?
I have two that are in high school. One's a freshman and one's a senior. And one's in college.
Okay. Did you find, as they moved from kindergarten through to 12th grade, that your ability to get involved just kind of fell off? Not because you didn't have time.
Within the
but I mean,
schools?
within the schools. Because schools become, my experience has been the schools become less, it's not so much less welcoming of it, but it's just the opportunities aren't there as much.
There are if you want to.
Yeah.
Once they got up into the higher grades, I started helping more with the PTA,
Okay.
more with events,
Right.
with sports.
Right.
So there are lots of ways to
So
stay
you might not be in
very...
the classroom as much as you
Exactly.
were probably, and I
Yeah.
was,
Yes.
kindergarten, the early grades. But yeah, that's a fair point. So do your kids get involved?
Yes. Yes, they definitely do. They do it through their church. They do it, the one that's a senior is National Honors.
Right.
And so between his Boy Scouts and that, he's putting in a lot of hours, and he enjoys them. He
Oh, that's
really
good.
enjoys them. It's
That's
not a
important.
chore,
Right.
which makes me feel very happy.
Oh, that is very good. So what's the word on the next on the project? Let's go back to that for a second, just to kind of tie this off. The first project you will see from the Neighborhood Conservation Plan, what would be?
It
And what
is
do you think-
improvements on Williamsburg Boulevard
Okay.
in two areas. One's Williamsburg and Kensington, which has exceedingly wide, all of the streets are very, very wide and very dangerous to cross. So that's going to make it a little safer when you go across Williamsburg, have a safe spot in the middle
Right.
so that you don't have to make it the whole way.
Right.
And then just down the hill at Williamsburg and Harrison.
Right.
And that is where we hope to have our bioretention feature, as well as the improvement for safety and beautification.
And what's your best guess? When are you going to see that? What would you guess?
It's
if you had to
supposed to be begun being built maybe next year, more likely 2014.
guess? Okay. So you're
but-
still a ways off.
Yes, well, especially right now. We are definitely a ways off because both of those intersections are being impacted by the new elementary school and may change our NC project. So we'll see.
We'll see. But you're still here, and you're
Yep.
still monitoring it, and you're still engaged in it. So
Yep.
that's really the important thing.
Yep. Just do the best we can. That's all you can ever do.
That's good words to live by. A lot of what you were doing with the Civic Association is kind of very structured, and it fits into a bigger system. But is there other volunteer activities you're doing that are, I don't know, not as structured, or?
Well, I do a few things with the church. Some are structured and some are not.
Right.
I do Meals on Wheels, which is very structured, specific day, specific time. So that's very easy to fit into a schedule. That's something that's a nice thing to do for people if they have
Right.
an ability to do that on their lunchtime. I also help with the creation of a prayer calendar, and that's just meeting with 2 other people, and we do that once a month. And that's very enjoyable.
Meals on Wheels, how did you get engaged in that, or how did that come about?
Just involved in the church. They said
Okay.
they needed more people, and I said, I can do that.
The prayer calendar.
Well, that is something where we make a theme, and we never know what it's going to be before we all sit down and meet. That's the only way to do it as far as we're concerned. And we come up with a theme, and then we come up with 4 or 5 weeks, depending upon the month, of each week, a focus of the theme and a scripture reading to focus for that week. So it's very inspired. It's absolutely wonderful because it's clearly none of the three of us ability. It's not us doing it. It's just wonderful.
What church is this?
Little Falls.
Oh, Little Falls.
Presbyterian.
Right. And what are some of the things you've done with the church?
I've also run the youth choir. That was quite a few years ago. I was in the choir for a long time until my other volunteer work took up the nights that they practiced, so I don't do that anymore. One comes, one goes. You have to sort of give and take.
There are only 7 days in a week.
That's exactly right. And I also ran the administration of a class that was for middle schoolers. It ran for 3 years. And they would meet twice a week and have homework and tests, and they would cover the entire Bible in 3 years. It was hard, but they did it. And they actually enjoyed it. On Wednesdays we'd have dinner and then class, and on Sundays we would just have class.
Right. Did you have a lot of? You described yourself before as
more of the administrator.
Okay, but the student who was hardworking and but didn't like to take tests.
I don't do tests well.
Don't do tests well.
Yeah, I'll take them, but my grade isn't very good.
So did you find a lot of empathy with the students as they were working hard? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Every time I was grading, it was, I know exactly what you mean, so that's going to count. And it wasn't, they got it. They just maybe didn't use quite the right words. But if they didn't use any of the right words and they didn't get it, then they didn't get the point.
Well, fair enough. And then what are some of the things you've done with Boy Scouts?
Boy Scouts, I have been the registrar for the past 6 years. I just handed that off to someone else, which is registering and rechartering our troop, it's varied between 110 and I think they're down to about 70 scouts now. So it's a fairly large troop.
That is fair.
And means a lot of paperwork. But it's rewarding because then everyone can continue and they can become Eagles if that's something that they really want to do. I help to organize and send out kids to high adventures, mainly sea-based. And I've also volunteered there twice, gone on the trip with the boys 2 times, and help out on any other things that are needed, weekly meetings, outings, and we also house all of the equipment at our house.
In these various things you're doing, do you see a lot of, is it a mix of a lot of turnover of other volunteers and a lot of people who stay with it for long periods of time like yourself?
Yes, there is a mix. I would say that, yeah.
And do you feel like you're serving like a mentor or something to people?
Certainly, as in Boy Scouts, the new registrar will rely upon, I'm not leaving. I still have children in the Scouts. So I'm there. She knows that I'm there for support and for questions and if she needs some backup. So that's very helpful. It's and as much as she wants me to help her on each step, I will without trying to step on toes. And I think that helps a lot. Meals on Wheels, that's a little different. You pretty much have a route, and if you can ride with someone, you can learn the ropes. But other than that, it's very hard to mentor.
Right, but it's also very structured and very specific.
Yes.
I mean, you know that the task is very specific. Because that's what I've noticed sometimes, not just Boy Scouts, but also Girl Scouts or different things like that. A lot of times it'll rise and fall based on the ability of the parents to maintain that leadership. Because the kids usually have the interest, but they can't make it happen on their own. They rely on the parent volunteers to have a structure and keep it going every year. My own experience in Connecticut was we had a good Boy Scout troop, but we only had it because we had a wonderful man who, long after his kids had grown out of Scouts, stuck with it and made it happen for us. And he reached a point where he needed to step away, and things kind of dissolved after that, unfortunately. But certainly We valued his commitment and his talents and his energy.
Yeah, makes a big difference.
It does. So you have been, at the moment, you're very engaged, very busy. But if you were to think about the future, what are some of the things you might want to do 5, 10 years from now in terms of the community?
Spend more, in terms of the community, okay.
Or your life, I guess, but the community.
Spend more time with my husband, because I'm not home for most nights because I'm at meetings. And he's at work during the day. So it would be nice to maybe spend just a tad more time with him in the evenings. For my service to the community, I would like to see it a little bit more structured without it being quite so many hours.
Right.
But I don't know if it's going to come that way or not, and it may not. I'll just take it as it comes.
No, that's a very good attitude.
But I enjoy helping others. I really don't feel that I'm complete if I'm not helping somebody.
Right.
So I can't imagine not volunteering my time.
Right.
It will always be there.
Right. That's very commendable. And we're lucky to have people like you in the community.
Well, I don't have an option.
I think you've already mentioned your father was 88.
Mm-hmm.
All right. He's your computer support,
Yeah.
any video editor, and he actually gets things done.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. What is his secret?
He's
What do you think is-
driven. He's always been driven.
Okay.
He started his own company. It became successful. He was able to sell it. He still worked as the leader to it, the president, and then they eventually forced him to retire because of their company rules. And he had helped to start a company in England, so he went over there, and he got that company that wasn't doing well back up on its feet, and then he finally was willing to retire.
Retire.
Yeah, retire is very much in quotes.
Does he sleep?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, he sleeps.
know when,
He goes to bed at 10, he gets up at 8.
Oh, all right. Well,
Yeah.
but he's very energetic.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you would never know he was 88. Never.
That's very impressive. And he lives in Florida.
Yes.
Wow.
And he travels the world.
Very impressive. Has he been interviewed on television about all these exploits?
No.
Get him in here next time he's visiting.
Will do.
We'll bring him in. Lynn, I want to thank you for coming on the program.
You're very welcome.
I also want to thank our entire volunteer crew here at Arlington Independent Media for helping us produce Civics today. They've been a great crew. But most of all, I want to thank Lynn Pollock for working so hard and so long and so many hours a week for making your community an even better place to live. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.